All right, question 21. We have a 45-year-old woman who presents with chronic sinusitis, recurrent otitis media, and hemoptysis. Exam reveals nasal septal perforation and bilateral crackles. Lab show creatinine of 2.1, and urinalysis shows hematuria and red blood cell cast. Chest CT shows multiple nodular cavitary lesions, and C, ANCA is positive. What's the most appropriate next step in management? A, start azithromycin and inhaled corticosteroids. B, initiate high-dose steroids and cyclophosphamide. C, begin anti-tuberculosis therapy. D, surgical biopsy of nasal septum. Or E, start rituximab and methotrexate therapy. So, in this clinical vignette, you have involvement of the nose, the lungs, and the kidneys. And this is something called granulomatosis with polyangiitis, or GPA, also known as Wegener's disease. How I remember Wegener's disease is it's the disease of C's. So C, ANCA, and then if you draw an imaginary C from your nose to your lungs to your kidney, it's kind of like another C there. So this is, Wegener's or GPA, and first line treatment is initiate high-dose steroids and cyclophosphamide. All right, question 22. So we have a 26-year-old woman who presents with intermittent right upper quadrant discomfort. She's been taking oral contraceptive pills for the past 8 years. Abdominal ultrasound reveals a 6 cm well-circumscribed heterogeneous mass in the right hepatic lobe. Lab show a normal liver function test and AFP. What's the next best step in management? A, observe with serial imaging. B, liver transplant. C, discontinue OCPs and refer for surgical resection. D, start corticosteroids. Or E, treat with antibiotics. So we have someone who's been taking oral contraceptive pills, now has a heterogeneous mass in the right hepatic lobe. So this is a hepatic adenoma, and they are benign estrogen-sensitive liver tumors that are often associated with OCP uses. And so what you're going to want to do is discontinue OCPs and refer for surgical resection. Question 23. A 60-year-old man with no hepatitis B presents for routine follow-up. He has no signs of decompensated cirrhosis and is not on antiviral therapy. He has no abdominal symptoms. Lab show mildly elevated AST to ALT and normal bilirubin. AFP is pending. What's the most appropriate next step in his care? A, abdominal ultrasound. B, CT abdomen and pelvis. C, liver biopsy. D, no further testing unless symptoms develop. Or E, start antiviral therapy. So the correct answer here would be A, abdominal ultrasound. So this patient has chronic hepatitis B, even though they don't have cirrhosis, and they need screening for hepatic cellular carcinoma due to the risk of cancer due to chronic hepatitis B. Screening is typically done with an ultrasound plus or minus an AFP every 6 months. So question 24. A 33-year-old man presents with fever, right upper quadrant pain, and diarrhea. He recently returned from a trip from Mexico. Exam shows tender hepatomegaly. Lab show white blood cell count of 15,000 and elevated ALP. Abdominal ultrasound shows a single hypoechoic lesion in the right lobe of the liver. Serology is positive for Entamoeba histolytica. What's the most appropriate treatment? Ceftriaxone and metronidazole, which is A. B, percutaneous drainage. C, oral metronidazole. D, albendazole. Or E, surgical resection. So, bless you, Mike. So the most appropriate treatment would be C, oral metronidazole. So this is a liver abscess due to Entamoeba histolytica and is treated with metronidazole followed by paramycin. But that's not, but the main thing to know is just that metronidazole to treat Entamoeba histolytica. Question 25. A 40-year-old sheep farmer presents with right upper quadrant pain and early satiety. Imaging reveals a large hepatic cyst with internal septations and eggshell calcifications. Serology is confirmed Echinococcus granulosus. There's no sign of rupture. What's the next best step in management? A, supportive care. B, IV metronidazole. C, percutaneous aspiration only. D, albendazole and pear procedure. Or E, surgical resection without pre-treatment. So here you want to do albendazole and pear treatment. Pear is puncture, aspiration, injection, and reaspiration, especially if the cyst is large. There is a risk for causing like a type 1 hypersensitivity reaction when doing this, so you don't want to just do aspiration because the cyst contents can spill into liver, causing a lot of causing type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So. Question 23. So we have a 36-year-old man who presents with 2 months of frequent bloody stools, abdominal cramping, and urgent need to defecate. He's also developed joint stiffness in the morning and a painful red nodule on his shin. Colonoscopy reveals continuous inflammation starting at the rectum and extending proximately with friable mucosa and superficial ulceration. Biopsy shows crypt abscesses. What is the most appropriate initial treatment? A, loperamide. B, TNF-alpha inhibitor. C, oral mesalamine. D, IV steroids. Or E, total colectomy. So this person has an acute ulcerative colitis flare. The biopsy showed crypt abscesses, which is pathognomonic for it. You also have the erythema nodosum of the shin. So this would be ulcerative colitis and would be treated with mesalamine, which is an oral 5-ASA. All right, question 27. A 25-year-old woman presents with 6 months of cramping, abdominal pain, and bloating. She has frequent episodes of loose stool that improve after defecation. Her symptoms are worse during periods of emotional stress. She denies weight loss, nocturnal symptoms, or blood in the stool. Physical exam and labs are normal. What's the most appropriate next step initial step in management? A, colonoscopy. B, reassurance and dietary modification. C, antispasmodics and opioids. Antispasmodics, oops. And D, all right, got here. So what is the most appropriate initial step in management? A, colonoscopy. B, reassurance and dietary modification. C, antispasmodic and opioids. D, antibiotics for presumed SIBO. Or E, celiac disease serologies. So here, you would want to do reassurance and dietary modification because this meets criteria for IBS. Initial treatment of IBS is dietary modification with reassurance and fiber. And the reasons IBS, you can see that the loose stools improve upon defecation. Sometimes you can get a mixture of constipation and defecation, especially during periods of emotional stress. So that's treatment. Question 28. A 28-year-old man presents with weight loss, intermittent low-grade fever, and a right lower quadrant pain. He also reports episodes of watery diarrhea. On colonoscopy, patchy areas of inflammation and cobblestoning are seen. Biopsy reveals transmural inflammation and non-caseating granulomas. What's the most appropriate next step? A, mesalamine. B, corticosteroids. C, surgery. D, high-dose loperamide. Or E, cyclosporine. So here, this is someone who presents with fever, right lower quadrant pain, and diarrhea, and cobblestoning seen. This is classic for Crohn's disease, and this person has an acute Crohn's flare, so what you're going to want to do is steroids. All right, question 29. A 32-year-old man with history of ulcerative colitis presents with worsening abdominal pain, bloody diarrhea, and fever. Vitals show temperature of 102.3 degrees Fahrenheit, heart rate of 112, blood pressure of 104/65. Exam shows abdominal distension and tenderness. Abdominal X-ray reveals dilated colon with loss of postural markings. What's the best next step in management? So A, colonoscopy. B, bowel rest, IV fluids, IV corticosteroids, and antibiotics. C, oral mesalamine. D, immediate colectomy. Or E, IV heparin for suspected mesenteric thrombosis. So here, this is someone who has a history of ulcerative colitis, and their presentation is concerning for toxic megacolon. And what you're going to want to do is try and manage this conservatively with bowel rest, IV fluids, IV corticosteroids, and antibiotics. Question 30. A 34-year-old woman presents with chronic diarrhea, bloating, and iron deficiency anemia. She also complains of a pruritic rash on her elbows and knees. She has a history of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Physical exam reveals pale conjunctiva and erythematous vesicles on her extensive forearms. Which of the following is the most appropriate initial diagnostic test? A. Antimitochondrial antibody. B. Colonoscopy with random biopsies. C. Serum tissue transglutamase IgA antibody and total IgA. D. D-xylose test. Or E. Hydrogen breath test. So we have someone here, history of autoimmune disease, has this pruritic rash on the elbows and knees, probably concerning for something called dermatitis herpetiformis, especially with kind of that description there, and chronic diarrhea and iron deficiency anemia. I would be concerned for celiac disease, so what I would want to do is C. Serum tissue transglutamase antibody and total IgA. Question 31. A 45-year-old woman with untreated hypothyroidism presents with fever of 103, altered mental status, nausea, and palpitations. Blood pressure is 140/60, heart rate is 142. She is tremulous and confused. The labs reveal undetectable TSH and elevated free T4. She was recently hospitalized for pneumonia. What's the most appropriate best next step? A. Radioactive iodine ablation. B. Methimidazole and wait for effect. C. Propranolol, PTU, steroids, and iodine. D. IV hydrocortisone only. Or E. Plasmapheresis. So this is concerning for thyroid storm, and how I remember the treatment for thyroid storm, which is often, I should say, is a life-threatening thyrotoxicosis that is triggered by stress or infection, is the 4 Ps. You have propranolol, PTU, steroids or prednisone, and potassium iodine. Actually, you might use prednisone, I'm trying to remember. Either case, it's steroids. All right, question 32. A 55-year-old woman presents with palpitations, anxiety, and unintentional weight loss. Labs show suppressed TSH and elevated free T4. Radioactive iodine uptake scan reveals a single hyperfunctioning nodule with suppressed uptake in the rest of the gland. TSI antibodies are negative. What's the best initial treatment? I guess I need to read it off. So A, observation. B, methimidazole plus propranolol. C, total thyroidectomy. D, radioactive iodine ablation. Or E, steroids and propranolol. What you're going to want to do here is a radioactive iodine ablation. So this is a toxic adenoma that presents with hyperthyroidism and has that focal uptake on radioactive iodine uptake. So what you're going to want to do is radioactive iodine or surgical resection. So we have question 33. A 34-year-old woman presents with 1 week history of anterior neck pain and fever following a recent upper respiratory infection. She also reports palpitations, tremors, and increased sweating. On exam, her thyroid is tender and enlarged. Labs reveal suppressed TSH and elevated free T4 and elevated ESR. Radioactive iodine uptake is low. What's the most appropriate next step in management? A, methimidazole. B, propranolol and PTU. C, NSAIDs for symptom relief. D, surgical thyroidectomy. Or E, radioiodine ablation. So here, this is concerning for de Quervain's thyroiditis, and the treatment for that would be C, NSAIDs for symptom relief. Usually, de Quervain's thyroiditis is a post-viral, painful, inflammatory thyroiditis and causes transient hyperthyroidism due to follicular destruction, not necessarily hormone overproduction, so you kind of get destruction of those follicles, leading to the release of thyroid. So NSAIDs are first line, and you kind of treat this conservatively. A 29-year-old woman presents with fatigue, palpitations, and unintentional weight loss over 3 weeks. Her thyroid is non-tender and diffusely enlarged. She gave birth 4 months ago. Labs show TSH of less than 0.01, free T4 which is elevated, and a positive antithyroid peroxidase antibodies. RAIU is low, so iodine uptake is low on that exam. What's the most likely diagnosis? A, Graves' disease. B, toxic multinodular goiter. C, silent thyroiditis, aka postpartum thyroiditis. D, facetious thyrotoxicosis, or E, thyroid lymphoma. So the correct answer here would be silent thyroiditis, also known as postpartum thyroiditis, and this is painless hyperthyroidism and positive anti-TPO antibodies, and it's transient and autoimmune in nature, and it's typically seen in the postpartum setting, hence also being known as postpartum thyroiditis. All right, question 35. A 45-year-old woman presents with progressive weight gain, facial rounding, proximal muscle weakness, and easy bruising. She has hypertension, impaired glucose tolerance. 1 milligram overnight dexamethasone suppression test reveals elevated cortisol. 24-hour urine-free cortisol is elevated. ACTH is also elevated. What's the most appropriate next step? A, repeat cortisol level in 1 month. B, CT abdomen. C, MRI pituitary. D, adrenal venous sampling. Or E, inferior petrosal sinus sampling. So here, what we're going to want to do is C, scan the pituitary. So based on their, I'll read this one. So the correct answer here would be C, MRI of the pituitary. This patient has an ACTH-dependent Cushing syndrome, so you're going to want to scan that pituitary to evaluate for Cushing's disease, which could be a pituitary adenoma that's functioning and causing these ACTH levels to be high. All right, question 36. A 28-year-old woman presents with fatigue, weight loss, and salt craving. She has diffuse hyperpigmentation and hypotension. Blood pressure is 88/60. Labs sodium is 129, potassium is 5.6, glucose is 60. Morning cortisol is low and ACTH is elevated. The co-syntropin stimulation test shows no increase in cortisol. What's the most appropriate long-term treatment? A, hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone. B, IV insulin and potassium. C, methimidazole. D, dexamethasone only. Or E, spironolactone. So the correct answer here would be A, hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone. So this is primary adrenal insufficiency, which is also known as Addison's disease. You get that hyperpigmentation. You also have symptoms of low cortisol. You see high ACTH, and you also see hyperkalemia and hyponatremia due to salt wasting from lack of aldosterone. The long-term treatment requires both glucocorticoid, which is hydrocortisone, and mineralocorticoid, fludrocortisone replacement, because you're deficient in both of those. So question 37. A 55-year-old woman presents with rheumatoid arthritis and nausea, fatigue, and hypertension after abruptly stopping prednisone. Vitals, her blood pressure is 85/60, heart rate is 102, labs show low sodium, glucose is 68, potassium of 3.8, cortisol is low, ACTH is also low, co-syntrophin stimulation test shows minimal increase in cortisol. What's the most likely cause of her adrenal insufficiency? A, autoimmune adrenalitis. B, chronic glucocorticoid use suppressing HPA abscess. C, pituitary apoplexy. D, adrenal hemorrhage. And E, congenital enzyme deficiency. So the patient just stopped prednisone. So thinking this answer here is B, which is chronic glucocorticoid use suppressing HPA axis. This is an example of tertiary adrenal insufficiency from chronic steroid use, which suppresses that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and causes low ACTH and low cortisol with normal potassium because aldosterone is intact. All right, question 38. A 72-year-old man is hospitalized for sepsis due to pneumonia. On hospital day 2, labs show TSH of 0.4, free T4 of 0.8, a total T3 of 48. So essentially summarizing those, TSH is low, free T4 is low normal, T3 is low. He has no history of thyroid disease, physical exam is unremarkable. What's the most likely cause of these lab abnormalities? A, primary hypothyroidism. B, central hypothyroidism. C, euthyroid 6 syndrome. D, subclinical hypothyroidism. Or E, facetious thyrotoxicosis. So here, this would be concerning for euthyroid 6 syndrome, which is a transient state in acutely ill patients where T3 is low, T4 may be low normal, and TSH is low normal, and is typically seen in people who are hospitalized or sick, hence what this person is experiencing, and no treatment is necessary, and thyroid functions should be reassessed after recovery. Question 39. A 67-year-old man with a 20-year history of poorly controlled diabetes presents with chronic foot ulcers over the plantar surface of their first metatarsal. They have decreased sensation in both feet. Exam shows a 2-centimeter ulcer with purulent base and exposed tendons. Foot X-ray shows bone destruction and air in the soft tissues. What's the most appropriate next step? A. Outpatient oral antibiotics and dressing changes. B. Hospital admissions and IV antibiotics with surgical debridement. C. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. D. Glycemic control alone. Or E. Compression stockings. The answer here would be hospital admission with IV antibiotics and surgical debridement. They have suspected osteomyelitis, which is also being shown with air in the soft tissues. Just confirming that diagnosis. What you're going to want to do is surgical debridement. See if you can save the foot by debriding the area. All right, that's it.